graduate students from 90 to 96. Phil Howard was my advisor. As I like to say, I just said this in the car on the way here. He was the only one crazy enough to take me on as a graduate student. And I believe I was his first graduate student, so he didn't know any better. And,
that's right.
And he just reminded me of the conversation we had, which was, you sort of have two choices. I do this area of mathematics that I know really, really well. Circle packing, I'm an expert in it, everybody knows my name, I've read lots of papers, blah, blah, blah. And I have this other area of math that I really want to learn, because it's really cool and fun and exciting, it seems to be new, and I don't know it, but if you wanted to, we could learn it together, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, but it is risky, and I was like, I'm in. I'm totally in on the risk factor. So it turned out to be a really smart decision on my part to do it that way. So, you know, that's how I got to be a graduate student and get my PhD. Now, when it was time to graduate, I think this is, or I don't know, some of you were, so some of the undergraduates just heard how you sort of get into graduate school. You stumble into graduate school and you're like, wow, I'm in a department now. And you can say to yourself, oh, am I in the right department? But in some sense, you got to make the most of wherever you are. There's going to be, if you're really that excited about it, you just make the most of where you are. And so I feel like a lot of those decisions people try to strategize on are really, it's not worth strategizing over. You just make the best of where you are. But for the graduate students, once you get to that place where you're getting closer and closer to graduation, you're panicking, thinking, what am I doing after this wonderful life as a graduate student, where I make really hardly any money, but I really don't have any responsibility either. What about getting a real job, right? So I can remember things were very, very different when I graduated than they are now. Because now I'm the director of graduate studies at Tufts, and so I see graduate students going out all the time. I have 4 PhD students of my own, 2 of which are on the job market this year. And I just had one graduate last year. So I'm watching what goes on, and it's very different than when I was there. One of the things when I was in that same place, I think a couple ways in which it's changed a lot is that I think graduate students now, they have more choices as to what that first step might be when they get out of graduate school. Just based on the experience I've had with, like I said, my own graduate students and also the ones that I know from just the department that aren't necessarily mine. I think what we do at Tufts, I'm not sure what they do here at Florida State, but what we do at Tufts is we try to get graduate students a couple years before they get to graduate. We try to ask them, what do you have a future, do you have a vision of what you see yourself doing, you know, when you get your PhD or not? Some say absolutely not, and some say, yes, I for sure want this kind of job. I already know my path. We also have applied students who say, I absolutely positively do not want to go into academics. All right, so we have quite a range. In fact, right now at this moment, I have two applied students who are like, I don't even want to do the teaching requirement. I already know what job I'm going to be getting when I get out of here, because they've done internships. You know, there's that, to all the way to the person who wants to do a research postdoc and become a professor, a research professor at a Research One university. So there's that, and when I say that, those are to me sort of two extremes. And then there's people who want to do liberal arts teaching. People that want more teaching than research, more research than teaching. There's kind of a range in there. And one piece of advice I try to tell the students as they move along in the program, 2 big things. One is don't lie to yourself about your own ability and your own desires. Don't think, oh, I have to be the researcher because everybody thinks I need to be the researcher. That shouldn't be everybody's goal. I don't think it should be, and I think a lot of people feel weird pressure to do it even when they don't want to do it. And believe me, it's hard enough to be a research mathematician without not enjoying it, I would say. I would say it's hard enough to think about unsolved problems all the time, like driving your car and running around, if you don't like it, right? So, but then there's the people that really know, that's my passion, that's what I want to do. And whatever, so trying to figure out and be really self-aware about where you want to go is a really important step. Talking to other people about it, talking to your advisor about it to find out, you know, what do you think I'm capable of? Your advisor is a source of information that watches you think about math, and there's somebody who, they've done it, they've gone through that process. And I mean, I know me, I'm brutally honest with my students, probably to a fault. But I think I'm not hurting them by giving them my honest opinion about where I think they're capable of going. I think the range of options when people first get out, you have to think about, so so I'll just name a few. So we've had students who go straight to a research postdoc. We've had students who go, this is a new thing that wasn't even around when I graduating, it's called a teaching postdoc. So these are still, it's like a postdoc. It comes after your dissertation and you're in a department for 3 years. You're sort of a visitor in that department for 3 years. But you have a heavier teaching load, and you're in a research postdoc, your primary goal is to contribute to the research environment of that department. They hired you, that's why they hired you. They thought, oh, your research fits with a couple people here, who want you to give seminars, talk to grad students, do whatever. A teaching postdoc, they have a plan for you too. They want you to fit into their teaching scheme, and they hope that you'll do some research while you're there. So those are temporary jobs. You can also, of course, apply for tenure track jobs at a teaching place. You can try to apply for tenure track jobs at a research place, but you're probably not going to get one without some postdoc experience. A lot of postdoc experience or a lot of papers or something. So those are, in the academic track, those are many of the things that, that our graduates have done recently. Research postdoc, teaching positions. I think those are the 3 main ones. The advice I try to give to students is if you really think there's a chance that you might want to continue on the research track, you probably shouldn't, if you don't have to, rush into a teaching job right off the bat, because once you're buried under a 3 and 3 or a 4 and 4 teaching load, it's going to be really hard to get your research back on track. Sometimes you don't have a choice, depends on how the job market goes. So there's lots of choices to make at the end game. I guess before I ramble on anymore, I should ask, are there other specific parts of like choices and things that you want to ask about before I just ramble on for 45 more minutes or 20 minutes or something? Yes?
What about that person that wants to be mainly teaching a little research?
So I don't know what you guys do now here as graduate students. When I was here as a graduate student, we taught, right? So we were TAs and we taught classes. At Tufts, at Tufts, what we try to do is if we can find that out early enough, we can tailor their graduate student experience in that direction. So for example, our PhD has a teaching requirement. Does yours have a teaching requirement? Yeah. So you can satisfy that teaching requirement lots of different ways. You could just say, I never want to do anything with a recitation. Like, I never want to actually run my own classroom. All the way at Tufts, you could teach a multi-section, you could teach one section of a multi-section calculus. So there you're given some independence, but somebody else writes the syllabus and you're like one little bolt in a big machine of calculus teaching. That I'm sure you guys have an even larger machine here of calculus, and you guys have below calculus teaching. We don't even have that at Tufts. And then you have other courses. So we have other courses. We have liberal arts math courses. So for graduate students that I know want to go on that track when they leave, I give them the opportunity to teach math for social choice, which is like the best name for a math course ever. Like, that's the best name for a math course. Math of social choice. All the people who don't want to do math but have to satisfy the math requirement take math for social choice. Right? So we have a couple of those. We have math for social choice. We have a symmetry class that's like group theory for the masses. And then we have some baby statistics. So what we try to do is for people who we have said to us, I for sure want to do this track, and we ask them very early, we try to get them in those classrooms. They can start out as a recitation instructor for it, and then they can run their own section of it. So I think, like I said, I don't want to get involved in internal politics at FSU's graduate program, but if there's a way in which you can gain that teaching experience while you're here, that will only help you in the end to get that job that you want. And the earlier you know that, the more you can do about that. That's why I stress to our second-year graduate students. I have like a one-on-one with each one of them, and I say, you don't have to, first of all, you don't have to answer me at all if you don't have an answer, and you can change your answer if you think you have an answer now and you want to change it next year. But let's try to start the conversation of where do you see yourself? Because, when you apply for jobs, you have to say something about your level of experience. And the more you can say about that, the better your application looks to the outside world. In fact, just yesterday I had this PhD student, right? He's graduating this year. It's not my student. He just comes in. I had like 9 minutes before my calculus class was going to start. He rushes into my office in like a full body sweat and said, I got to ask you a question. I said, okay. I have 9 minutes and I haven't prepared for my calculus class. And he says to me, what do I do? And I'm like, what do? You mean like right this moment, or like for the rest of your life? What are you talking about? And he said, I don't actually know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I'm graduating this year, and like, of course he blamed it all on his advisor, which I'm sure is not 100% true, that his advisor has never had a conversation about graduating. I kind of think that was a lie. But he was like, should I be doing this? Should I apply to every single job on math jobs because all I have to do is click a button? And I was like, no, I don't think that's, I mean, you could, I guess, but like, what if some place in the middle of Arkansas says you can have a 4-4 teaching job? Would you actually take that job? Like, why would you apply for a job that you're absolutely positively not going to take? Is it just because you want 300 rejection letters, or what is it that, like, what is your motivation for just blanket applying? I think that's a crazy strategy, even though you could just click a button and say yes, 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 yes. I don't think that's a great strategy, because I think emotionally you're all over the map. And this guy's already emotionally all over the map. So like, this was just going to be like the worst therapy advice I could have given this poor kid. I said, you know what? I'm not going to have this conversation with you now because I have 9 minutes before my class. However, on Monday, I want you to come in and let's try to strategize and not apply for 6,000 jobs, 5,000 of them which you wouldn't even take if you got an interview. All right, so I think that's important to know a little bit, to focus a little bit on what your strengths are and where you think you might get a job. I think that's important. What about people that are, so how far along are, who's graduating this year? Are there people that are on the job market now? 1, 2, so there's 2 people on the, like, they're going to be on it this year. Are you terrified? Yeah. You're absolutely terrified. Have you written your, so that's another thing this kid said, I should already have my teaching statement written and my research statement written. Have you done all that? Yeah. Yeah, well, you're already like 10 steps ahead of the entire masses. Yeah, so I think that's another especially important thing, is targeting those statements to where you want. Like, for example, if you want a teaching job in a particular kind of place, you should really think about that teaching statement a lot. We just hired, so now I'll tell you from the other side of it. We just hired 2 employees at Tufts. One of them was hired primarily for teaching. So this is actually this is becoming what I think is some, I don't know how it is at Florida State, but what I have noticed is there are more of these kinds of jobs in places like Tufts that are liberal arts sort of / research. Tufts to me is like completely schizophrenic. They don't really know what they want to be, but that's why I like being there, because neither do I. So they have what are called lecturers. We have part-time lecturers, which you probably, I don't know, I'm guessing you have some of those here. And then we have people who are full-time lecturers, and then we have people called senior lecturers. So full-time lecturers are people who are generally hired, part-timers are like treated the worst. They're paid the least, and they have 0 job security. It can go from one semester to the next. You could not have them. They're literally hired to pick up that one course we couldn't cover. A full-time lecturer is hired for a year. So they're literally hired for 1 year of teaching. And that's not a very satisfying job because it lasts for 1 year. But at the same time, if you do really well at that 1 year, they might hire you again. Right? They might hire you again. Or it might get you that teaching experience that you didn't get when you were a graduate student, and you could cast a slightly wider net when you do apply for jobs. Maybe you didn't like that place that you were for a year. They might have liked you, but maybe you didn't like them. Okay? The other one are senior lecturers. This I've noticed is this is a new, I know it's new at Tufts, but I've also heard of other departments doing it, where these are people who have more job security. They have become invaluable to a department. All right? So these are people who come in as a full-time lecturer. Everybody loves them, including the students. And the department realizes that actually, if we lose this person, we're not going to be happy, because they do certain things really well that none of the research professors do well, like deal with undergraduates, for instance, in a really nice way, or advise undergraduate majors sometimes. So these people are hired for longer periods of time. They have a contract. They're not tenured, they're not tenure stream, but they're hired for longer periods of time. And they're given benefits and a salary, and they have a lot more job security. I think that's a different path than going to a place that primarily recognizes teaching, and you're tenured based on some sort of teaching profile. This is a slightly different thing, but more and more I see this sort of thing happening. At Tufts, we just hired somebody in like that with a 5-year contract. Their job description, I mean, this might be exactly you. It was very difficult to find this needle in a haystack. We were looking for somebody specifically that had experience with bridge programs. So what is a bridge program? That's a program for bridging students who are not traditionally tough students, so they didn't go to prep schools, and they're from inner city schools, they're from schools that are traditionally toughs, kind of recruiting places. They might have a slightly weaker math and science background. We were given a hire to hire somebody specifically to cover that demographic of teaching. That's very, very specific. And so if you've had any experience and you read a job ad like that, how did we pick our top 3 candidates? If they mentioned anything at all about the word bridge, even if they just lived on a street that has the word bridge in it, they made the first cut. We just literally searched I know because I was the head of the hiring committee. I literally did Command F on my Mac and said bridge. And that already right off the bat, cut out 350 applications. Literally, the word bridge never appeared. You weren't going to be looked at because there's no way we were going to look at those applications. So then we were left with still 150 that we read. And somehow we managed to find this insanely good person. I don't know, I still can't believe we found him. And so that's why I'm saying some of it's just accidental and random. That was like a complete confession that I just made right there. So the Command F, because literally the job search thing is, because everybody's clicking those 3,000 buttons, your application, obviously your file has to have the word bridge in it. You want it to be looked at for that position. See what I'm getting at is that somehow you have to do that. Then on the other hand, we hire a postdoc in geometric group theory, then we're Command F-ing on some other word, like we're just doing something else to get those kind of people off the job market.
So when you posted that job somewhere, did you say we're looking for a bridge?
Yes, we were very specific in our job ad. Yeah. And I think this is what a bunch of us are just going to be doing exactly what I'm doing right now with our graduating people. We have like 9 PhDs going out this year. They're all on the job market at once. And we only have 35 in our program, and 9 of them are going out this year. It's going to be crazy. So we're having a meeting with them next week that's kind of like this one, where I'm going to discuss probably the same things about targeting certain jobs, but also, obviously you don't want to say, oh, these are the only 5 jobs I would take because I'm just that awesome. I mean, it's great to have your top 5 or your top 10 that you say, these are really the ones I want. But obviously you should apply for a few more. But of those ones you really, really want, you should supremely target it in the cover letter. You should write a cover letter, look at their job ad, and literally say something relevant. And then for the other ones, you might have a more general, oh, I want to be a postdoc. You might have a postdoc kind of job, cover letter. You can have maybe a less specific. But for the dream jobs, you should have a very, and I'm only saying because now I've been on the other side of it. I have no idea how I got the job I got. I still just can't even imagine the set of circumstances that did not get me cut from the pile when I look at it from the other side of it now. But I know there are certain things that you can do like that, like really addressing the criterion in the job ad, more than just clicking the button.
So you recommend when you're applying for that specific job, tailoring just your cover letter?
Well, and your teaching statement. Again, your teaching your research statement, depending on what kind of job it is. If it's a job that really wants a specific kind of teaching, address it in your teaching statement. If it's a job that wants to be a researcher in geometric group theory, tailor your research statement. I mean, don't lie, obviously. You don't want to say, I'm a geometric group theorist when you do, computational PDEs. That would be crazy. But just because you want to live in Milwaukee or whatever, you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to lie. But you wouldn't be picking that job anyway if that was, you want to look for a job match. But those, when you say, oh, this job is so perfect for me, you must have had a reason why that job was perfect for you, and you should somehow convey that in your cover letter. Even things like, I want to live there, right? Like, of course, Boston, we don't really have that problem. Everybody wants to live in Boston, or it seems that way. It seems like everybody does live in Boston. Every time I get on the road, that's what I'm thinking, is that everybody in the world lives in Boston. But I have a friend who's at Bucknell, and one of the things they look for, I mean, that's a great job to have. It is in the middle of nowhere. And their biggest problem is they get people there, it's a great job, they treat them like gold. But there's some people who just don't want to live in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. So one of the things they look for in their cover letter is, I really like the whole idea of living in the middle of nowhere. I mean, however they say it in a really positive way, I know, because I know people on the search committees are like, this person's never going to move here, this person, and they're making an assumption. They don't really know that person's never going to move there, but based on their cover letter, they go, I know this person's never going to live here. So I live in a while. Why are we going to fly them here, and if they're never going to live in Lewisburg? So I think those kinds of things those intangibles are real. I mean, remember, we're human beings on the other side of that, trying to pick a needle out of a haystack. So I think the more that you can target it, kind of I can see myself in this job because of, I've seen absolutely perfectly written cover letters, and I'm like, wow. Like the guy who we hired for that bridge job, his cover letter should have been like the example. We should have just used his cover letter as our job ad. That's what we should have done, because it was that perfectly written. And he was a new PhD. He got that job right after his PhD. He had no other experience. It turned out he had done a bridge program as a graduate student. He did one for a high school. So he had done a bridge program at one of the inner city schools where he was from in California. And then they asked him to do it as a graduate student at in his department. They said, well, we heard a rumor, like because nobody's talking to anybody, but we heard a rumor that you did this bridge program in the community, and we would like for you to do it to help out with something here. And he did, and now he got this job. So it's kind of scary, weird. But that's good news and bad news. You think, oh my gosh, it's so random, I have no control over it. But then there's the good news, which is, oh, it's so random, I have no control over it. Because nobody else does either. So I'm an optimist. I believe those are the best circumstances. I'm like, well, I mean, there's no reason why anybody else is going to get it but me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I actually like that. Some people don't like that, but I sort of do. I like those. All right, other questions about the job? Yes?
What about the one that has two-body problem? What I mean is, he and her, his wife is on the job market. So what do you suggest those people?
I think you should just break up and go other places. I think that's a much harder problem to solve. What I would not do, honestly, is I wouldn't mention it in the job search. Not at the beginning. It's not something I put in my cover letter. Unless you're the other half, unless you're sort of the second half. If one of the people already has a job, which is oftentimes, I mean, if you're going out at the same time on the job market, that's different than somebody gets a job here and they have a significant other. That's a different setup than two people on the job market at the same time. I think you're better off not mentioning it, honestly. I think it's another one of those things. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. It's not fair to say that a search committee will look at that and say, oh, we don't want to hire two people, and this person's never going to come here unless this other person comes here. People do it. I've actually heard people say it on the job search. They're not supposed to, but they do.
Right, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. You look at it and you'll say, we're not going to go with this one. They got a two-body problem. We don't have two hires. Why
Again,
anything?
it's not fair. It's not nice because life isn't. But it's true though. And life has to deal with reality, and that's reality. So it's best to. I don't mean you want to like hide it in secrecy, like if you're in the same room acting like you don't know each other in front of people. I mean, I wouldn't do that. But like, at your job, in the job search, you should think independently. Your applications should be independent, and you should think that way. And you can target the same department or the same city. I mean, I think that's the best strategy for the two-body problem, is not to target the same department, but the same city maybe, two different departments. I mean, if you're in the same mathematical area, you just shouldn't be dating. It's just that simple. I don't know how you got to be dating somebody in the same mathematical area. That's just bad from every possible perspective. Kidding. You're only supposed to date them in grad school, then you break up right when it ends, and then you date somebody else. That's what you're supposed to do. Right, you only have that for like just a few years in grad school, and then you throw them out right when it's time for the job search. But I think you do have to think about that. That's a very, very hard problem. And like I said, cities like Boston, or some universities actually make an effort to help out with the two-body problem. For example, Bucknell University, middle of nowhere, they actually welcome two-body problems because they have a better chance at killing two birds with one stone. They're like, oh, we get two hires, that's one less search committee. They do search committees all the time because they have high turnover, because they get people who don't want to live in Lewisburg. But if it's two people, they know that if two people come to Lewisburg, they're going to be like, wow, now it's like inertia times two. Now two people would have to be unhappy at the same time and want to leave here. 2 people are gonna come in and buy a house together, and like, then they're trapped in Lewisburg. So they actually welcome it, and they are upfront about it. They're like, please have the 2-body problem, we love it. So you have to think about, like, that's a strategy. But if you and your second body don't wanna live in Lewisburg, don't apply there either. But that's certainly, in some ways, that's an easier way to get a job, is to live in a really undesirable place. Not that Lewisburg is bad, I've been there many times, it's actually quite nice. They have good restaurants, they have like homemade beer, I don't know, I mean, they have plenty for me, but not for everybody. So, but yeah, that's a difficult problem to solve. I wanted to say too something, unless somebody wants to interrupt me with a question. No. I wanted to say something that I told, so we have a graduate student organization called the OGSM, so it's the Organization for Graduate Students in Mathematics. So it's probably like what you're doing. But theirs is actually some sort of bona fide thing on campus, that they have their own budget that's given by the graduate school. They did this all on their own. We have nothing to do with it. And in fact, we're continually amazed at what they get. I still don't know how they do it. But they do this series of talks by people like, not just me, but like different faculty members from our department and outside people if they can get them. And they target them on things like this. They get them to sit down for 30 minutes. They videotape them. And like, you're on camera. And they ask them questions and they videotape, they put it on YouTube for the broader mathematical community to see. So you might hear, like, I can show you their website, and you could maybe, all you have to do is type in OGSM at Tufts and it'll come up. So, but like, I think thinking of yourselves as a unit and as like comrades in this fight is a good approach. I mean, I have found that our graduate students in 5 years have like completely transformed themselves before they get to the stage of graduation. There's so much communication. They meet weekly. They use our conference room for a weekly meeting, food paid by some other of us on campus, which is great. And they have like a governing board, and they're just completely organized. And they really are, they torture the faculty for, we deserve this, we want more professional development, we want this, we want that. And not that I'm telling you guys to do this as part of professors here, but it sounds like, at first we were all afraid of it, all of our faculty. In fact, there's still some faculty that don't like the fact that they act like they deserve something. But overall, it has made the environment of our graduate program like 10 times better. Because on the other hand, what the faculty learn is that I can say things like, you know what, the graduate school is asking me for such and such data. And some graduate student runs off, gets all this data, compiles it, and puts it in like the most perfect format ever, and I just hand it over to the dean. Like, I've actually realized that this is valuable for the department. The graduate students are extremely capable at getting information that I don't have. And so I find that that's been a really helpful, for those of you who are a little bit younger that are going to be here a while, talking to your peers. And that's a big, I think that's been a really big thing for our graduate program. They expect some professional development, and they're getting it, so that's a good thing. They're expecting faculty to talk to them about these sorts of things. Oh, and I was going to say too was giving talks, for people targeting a research job, you have to give research talks somewhere, right? I mean, do you have a seminar where students give research talks? Do you guys have?
Yeah, we have seminars.
You have seminars where is it just students talking to students?
It's both, it's students. So the graduate student seminar, students talk to students. Then we have all the other seminars,
Yeah.
In those are teachers talking to students and speakers talking to speakers.
That's good. I think that you can't, I have to thank Phil Bowers for that, because when I was a graduate student, we were trying to learn this area together, geometric group theory, which you'll hear some about if you come to the pulpit today, is, so what he did, and people were like, wow, that is crazy that you're doing that, but basically what he said was, we need to learn this. And so we don't have any speakers in our seminar for a while, so that's just you're like the default speaker in the topology seminar. Literally, for 2 years I was the default speaker. Now, the first few times was really uncomfortable for me, and because it's professors, and I just thought they were right and I was wrong. Every single time anybody raised their hand, I was like, oh, I must have done something wrong. And it took me several times to realize that actually I wasn't always wrong. Like, I was wrong plenty, but then I started to realize that they were wrong sometimes. And it took me a long time to be able to say, actually, I think you're wrong. And if you know my personality, you would find it hard to believe that it even took me more than 5 minutes, because I'm pretty aggressive as a human being. But in that environment, you're not. Like, these are the professors you learn all this math from, and so you're like, wait a minute, they must be right because they taught me algebraic topology. I can't possibly know an algebraic topology fact better than them. But it turns out that if that algebraic topology fact arises in the middle of some other problem that you know better than them, then yeah, you know it better than them. So that was the best experience, and I've told everybody, like, everywhere I go, they're like, oh my gosh, like, why are you so comfortable giving talks? I'm like, because I gave so many of them when I was a graduate student. So by the time I got to my job talk, that was nothing compared to talking to the faculty in this department. Compared to talking to our topology group, oh, I thought was pretty hardcore at the time. And a lot of them were very interested in learning the topic that Phil and I were learning. So it was, but it was an invaluable experience, even though it was a lot of hard work, well worth the effort to just prepare something for seminar, whether it's going through a paper or something that you thought of on your own, and really talking about mathematics in front of other mathematicians and building up that immunity, as I like to call it, the immunity of, oh, no, I can't answer the question. Sometimes you just say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, and learning how to just say that and be okay with it. Be like, I don't know how to answer it, but here's what I think, and you know, maybe I'll think about it more, or maybe I won't, but I don't know the answer right now. I think that's an important step in becoming, if you're the kind that's thinking more about the research track, I think you have to be able to do that and be confident about it. Right? Even at your job talk for teaching, I mean, we had people come in and give mini lectures on like calculus, right? Like we told them ahead for this 5-year position I was just talking about, we have the interview, we had no idea what we were doing. Like we did not know how to interview for one of these positions, so we just made up stuff. We were like, well, what if we had them give like a 15-minute lecture on the intermediate value theorem or something? I mean, like, and so we did. And you would be surprised that some of the candidates were like not confident doing that. And it wasn't that they didn't know calculus. We know they know calculus. If they had to sit down, they would know calculus. But that confidence of being able to have an exchange about mathematics in front of a room full of people is what you're going to be doing for your job if you decide to become an academic. You're either going to have to be talking to students, talking to peers, or even someday, hopefully not, maybe talking to an administrator about what you do for a job. And all of those places eventually, you want to be confident, saying like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. You want to at least appear that way, even if you're not. That's the big, so giving talks. Is it a requirement? Is there any stage in the degree here where you are required to give a public lecture?
You're ATA, right? The candidacy exam.
So you can. So that's after you finish. You have some sort of qualifying exam to make sure you have a pulse or something, and then you have a candidacy exam. That's probably something more specialized, right? All right. So then, and now is that public in the sense that everybody's invited, or is there a committee? How's that work?
Well, it's a committee. It is public, but usually it's the committee that shows up. Most major professors have their students talk in seminar. I mean, I've had Dane talk several times in seminar. I mean, with you, you're right. I had you talk every single week. I mean, I created seminars out of nothing. I just say, okay, we're having a seminar on this.
Yes, this book or this book.
And I mean, it wasn't even a topology seminar, and usually about 5 people would show up. And I was.
Yeah, we also have informal seminars.
Yeah, that's true. Echo's been doing informal
ones. It doesn't even have to be one of the official seminars.
Right. And that's anywhere you can find, anyone that will listen to you talk about math, you should take advantage of it. I think that's, the only reason I asked, our candidacy exam is controversial now because